Well, welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of Time to Shine. My name is Adrian, also known as Northern Star on Twitter, and I'm not joined alone. My faithful friend Mike is here with me. Hi, Mike.
Hello, everyone. It is Mike at the Berry Truck back again to discuss the magic of Shining Time Station. And boy, Adrian, we have a big one today, don't we?
This is magic-filled, this episode. There's so much magic, I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of it.
I'm bursting at the seams with all this magic right now.
No, but really, like this one is very special, and I have to thank Mike for suggesting it, because as you guys know, we've been doing our sort of overviews of all the seasons, and now we're hopping back into, well, in between seasons 1 and 2, but technically the end of season 1 to review the 21st episode, which is the Christmas special, the first hour-long episode of Shining Time Station is a gift.
Yes, indeed.
And Mike, I believe you had the idea because this is sort of another kind of key special in the show, correct?
Yeah, this is this was the first special that they had ever done, and to date, well, I mean, I guess to date, because of course the series ended in the 90s, but
Right.
This was also, surprisingly, the only Christmas special that they ever did.
Which is weird when you think about it, considering that the show had 3 seasons, that they only kind of did it for 1. Because I think they totally, I mean, as we talked about a couple episodes ago, they could have made the Thanksgiving episode into a Christmas episode.
Yeah, exactly. If they hadn't done that, if they had stuck with the original version of Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure, then we very well could have had maybe not a special, but definitely at least a Christmas episode in one of the following seasons. So I think the fact that we don't have another Christmas episode just helps to make this one all the more special.
I agree, and I don't think you can really top it either. It was,
No.
funnily enough, like this was one of the first episodes I saw as a kid, because when my grandma was recording season 2, this was, I think, maybe 4 or 5 episodes in to the first season, so it must have fallen on a Christmas, and then they re-aired this special. So I always remember it as a really special episode in there, and I liked it a lot as a kid. What do you remember early on about it, Mike?
I mean, I remember it very well from early on in life because this was the only Shining Time Station VHS that I had as a kid.
No
And
way. Oh.
yeah, it was the only, I didn't have any of the season 3 ones. This was the only one I had. And, you know, it's funny. I have like 3 Christmas movies that I always make sure that I watch every year. Everything else is kind of like, if it's on TV, sure, I'll watch it. Or if other people want to watch it, then I'm down for it. But there are 3 that I always watch, and one of them, without fail, is 'Tis a Gift.
Excellent. What are the other 2? Can I ask?
Yeah, so the other 2, they're kind of niche, but so one is the Pee-wee's Playhouse Christmas special from, I want to say 1989 or 1990.
Oh, amazing!
Like oh my god, it's so of the time. Like there's a very, very young Whoopi Goldberg, a very young Oprah. You know, it's like a timestamp of that time. And there was actually, I don't know if it's still on YouTube, but there was like an upload someone had done from when it was airing on TV. So you're just seeing like all the commercial breaks in between, and the commercials are like so late 80s that it hurts, and I love it. It's the best thing ever. So there's that one, and then the other one I watch is Muppet Family Christmas.
We talked about. Oh,
yeah. So for those who don't know, this is not. Whenever I say this one, people think I'm referring to Muppet Christmas Carol, but this was actually the very first Muppet Christmas special that they did, and it's awesome because they've got not only the Muppets, but you've also got the Sesame Street characters.
Yeah,
and then there's a point where they also go into the basement of. It's the home of Fozzie Bear's mother. They go into the basement, and there's like a crack in the wall, and they meet the Fraggles from Fraggle Rock.
Oh, so great. Well,
it's the best.
And Barton Winslow, Gerard Parks.
That's right. We've got another Shining Time connection because Gerard Parks, who played Barton Winslow from season 2 onward in Shining Time, he was the character of Doc in Fraggle Rock. So the premise is that Doc and his dog Sprocket go to Fozzie Bear's mother's house for Christmas because she's supposed to go away to the Bahamas or something like that.
Yeah.
And then a snowstorm hits and everyone comes over and they have the best Christmas ever.
It was really sweet. I saw that for the first time like a year or two ago, and I was like, okay, buying that.
Oh my god. Yeah, as soon as I know that I'm doing decorating for Christmas every year, it's like, okay, cue up those 3. Let's go. This is going to be the best start to the season ever.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. For me, it's definitely, I mean, it's funny. I don't actually watch this at Christmas because I watch it like throughout the year. But for me at Christmas, it's definitely Muppet Christmas Carol and the Santa Claus, the original. Those two for me are just like so. They just bring back the 90s for me.
Those ones are super classic too.
Yeah, and hopefully when this episode is released, it is closer to Christmas, and this is all going to get you guys in the Christmas spirit.
That's what we're hoping, if all goes to plan.
yes, with the release schedules and all that. But we are very glad that you're joining us nonetheless. Mike, do you want to kick us off with a brief summary for those who haven't seen it? Although if you haven't, I mean, get out right now and do it.
Exactly. Pause this episode, go watch it first, we implore you, and then come back, and you'll be coming back right as I do for you a recap, or for those who have already seen the episode or maybe want a recap or a summary beforehand. Here you go. This is my little gift to you. So it is the Christmas season at Shining Time Station. The season is bustling with people coming and going. Matt and Tanya, of course, are at the station. They are a little bored and anxious for Christmas to come. Of course, we have Schemer here, who is campaigning to be Santa's helper for the Gala holiday pageant. All the while, Stacy is trying to keep everything under control and keep the station running smoothly.
Shining Time Station. Trains from here to everywhere. Stacy Jones speaking. Yes, the train from Doodlehaven is on time. Well, yes, it's still snowing, but oh yes. Oh, happy holidays to you too. Bye-bye.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm all right.
Now, a wrench is thrown into the plan when, for Matt and Tanya, the bane of their existence, young Vicky, is brought to the train station because her mother has to do some shopping and she doesn't want to go. So they have to put up with Vicky's cantankerous nature, all while trying to be good children for Christmas, of course. In the midst of all this, a mysterious stranger comes to Shining Time Station. His name is Mr. Nicholas, and he claims that he's waiting for a train called the Northern Star. Everyone's confused. No one has ever heard of this train before, and as the snowstorm outside gets worse and worse and all the trains are being canceled, he is still staying in the station, insisting that the Northern Star will come. Eventually, Vicky makes peace with Matt and Tanya. They all come together to be friends. But there is an argument that breaks out amongst the adults at Shining Time Station over who gets to be Santa's helper. Everyone has seemingly thrown their hats into the ring, and no one can decide who it should really be. With the help of Mr. Nicholas, Vicky sings a song that brings everyone together, and as they all come together to celebrate Christmas, we see Mr. Nicholas vanish from the station out onto the mythical Northern Star.
Wow. Well, beautifully said, Mike.
Oh, thank you.
It is quite an episode. They pack a lot in, and at the same time, it doesn't feel like an hour to me because it flows so well.
Yeah, when I was rewatching it today, usually that's what I'm looking out for. You know, I'm obviously trying to look at this stuff with a critical eye now.
Yes.
As much as nostalgia will always be there for me with Shining Time Station, I definitely want to look at it from a critical point of view. There's really nothing from this special that I think I would remove or alter in any way. Like, everything just flows really well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I actually can't think of one thing that I would actually remove because I think it's very well written. And actually, do you know who wrote it?
I do. This episode was written by, I hope I'm saying the last name right, Brian McConaughey.
Yeah. Okay, I was wondering because he wrote so much for the show, and he wrote the first episode and also the last special that we reviewed, and this one. And I think he's a very good writer.
He's done a lot of very iconic episodes, if you ask me. I mean, like you said, he's done the first one. He did Things That Go Gahuga in the Night. Is This the End? Bully for Mr. Conductor, which I think a lot of people see as a standout episode. He's contributed a lot to the show, and I think, if I can be so bold, I think this is definitely his crowning achievement of contributions to the show, for sure.
I think so too. And it's, it's interesting because I didn't grow up watching season 1 as it aired. And so I imagine for folks who did grow up with it, it was a real treat, especially because I know that there was some threat of Shining Time being canceled because of funding from PBS, although I think it was a bit more of not a red herring, but, when they announced that might happen, there were letters pouring in from mothers and fathers and families about the impact of the show. So it was clear that it had made a mark.
Oh, certainly.
And then I imagine for this to come back around, I think it was, aired Christmas of 1990.
That's right.
And it must have been a nice reunion for the cast and crew as well, because they wrapped shooting back in 88. Season 1 premiered in 89.
Right.
So it had been almost 3 years, which is a chunk. Oh, well, not 3 years, 2 years, I guess.
2-ish years, yeah, but that's still, years. I mean, when you're especially dealing with, younger actors as well, like, you can definitely see that it's not a huge age gap, but Matt and Tanya have definitely aged in that time from season 1 to 'Tis a Gift, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, are there any other kind of, initial impressions or memories that stick out to you for this episode?
Oh, boy. I mean, everything. I feel like there's so many memorable moments from this episode. There's so many guest stars in this episode, people that we don't see again, and they really make an impact, definitely for me. The music in this episode, not just obviously the score, but everything by the Jukebox Band and the Picture Machine, and especially the ending where the whole cast comes together to sing. It's really, really special, and it really nails what I think any good holiday special should do. It makes you feel warm. It makes you feel like Christmas is this special time where everyone really does come together. So yeah, it's always struck me as like an essential Christmas viewing, and I really can't picture ever going through a Christmas without watching this.
I agree. It really sums up the heart of the show for me. I know I've said that about a few episodes, but this one does really do that. It captures the spirit of Shining Time Station, and I think of the Christmas season, and it feels like a family. That's what it feels like. It's just all the characters, the main cast, and then all the supporting characters, and the way they all come together at the end. It's very genuinely sweet and heartful. And it's significant, I think, because this was the first time they filmed in Toronto. So it was a big transition. It's the
very first time they came to our homeland.
Exactly. And that was a huge transition, shipping the entire set, which was huge, all the way from New York to Toronto, reassembling it just for this special before it was back in storage, before they started filming, season 2. So it was a big production. They flew Ringo up here to be with them. They also shot a little behind the scenes segment that was released, I think, a year or so ago, where they have footage of them on set and stuff, which was very exciting to see, because we don't often get to see that. We get to see Matt and Tanya interacting with Ringo's doll and little bits and pieces. There are some differences in the set I noticed watching it, like they don't have a little yellow lantern by the bench, so that may have been misplaced, or they had to get a new one. The jukebox has a couple cosmetic differences, and they did this really odd thing. I don't know if you noticed, Mike, where instead of, where they had the kind of song selector knob, before in season 1, it was like this recessed sort of button thing you couldn't really see. And then now they have all the buttons sticking out, the protruding, 2 or 3 inches. It looks really awkward.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, so have a look. And they only did it for this episode. And then by the time they started season 2, they just replaced it with like a brown cap. So I imagine people were bumping into it because it sticks out very noticeably.
Oh man, yeah. I can imagine Brian getting his jackets or something caught on those buttons as he walked
totally.
by.
Totally. But yeah, there's such a familiarity to this episode. It always touches me. As I was chatting with Mike before, it always brings a tear to my eye. Well, multiple times. There are multiple moments where it's moving, and then the ending wraps it all together. And I remember the feeling of like the credits rolling and me always crying as a kid in like a nice, sweet way. And then moving into the next episode, which I think was Sweet and Sour on my VHS compilation. So
what a jump.
Quite a jump. I know. It's funny, but it flowed to me. It like it was, and like I said, it's nice seeing all the secondary characters back again. Like I really like JB King's thread in the story. I will say, for me, it's a bit alarming seeing how much older Matt and Tanya look. I actually looked up how old they were when this was filmed, and they were 10 and 11. So they were really getting up there.
Yeah, they were.
The jump between, 8 or 9 years old when they filmed the first season. So for me, if there was one thing with this episode that I struggle with, I think it's that they're a little old to be believing in Santa. For me, like at that age, I mean, I still believe in Santa. Sorry, don't get me wrong, but they just they don't seem as convincingly childlike as they were before. Naturally, because they're older. But I noticed that a little bit rewatching it now. Yeah,
now that you mention that, I do think that especially with Matt, because I think of all the times in season 1 where he was just this like wide-eyed, amazed kid, and he was always so like taken with everything that happened in the station.
And he was tiny.
And he was tiny, yeah. And I mean, he's still relatively tiny in this one, but he definitely feels more subdued. And I guess that just comes with, the natural age of the actor. And, it's just, you play a little bit more grown-up character, I suppose.
That's, yep. And they're not as, like, I think, interesting you use the word subdued. I think Tanya, played by Nicole, she's also just not as open. I think I'm used to them being like kids and, speaking their mind, and they you can see that they've grown older, but there is a wonderful familiarity to all the cast being back together. And I think it is really nice that they did a special with, those actors, those kids, and bringing Ringo back.
I agree. Now, in contrast to the cast all being back, we should highlight that we've got quite a few new faces this time around in this special.
Absolutely. Who do we have?
Well, let's start off. We'll try and go in sequential order if my memory can serve me correct on this one here. First of all, we see that there is a new engineer at the station. Rather than Harry, who was played by Leonard Jackson, we have his cousin, Tucker Cooper, played by Arden Bess. He highlights to us in his interaction with J.B. King that Harry was transferred to Twiddly Junction, and he's here to help out with the holidays. Following that, we also have Vicky, who is played by Rachel Miner. She is the child that Matt and Tanya interact with, the one who sort of doesn't like Christmas to start with and slowly comes around. And then, of course, probably the biggest of all the people that they have guest starring in this special is Lloyd Bridges as Mr. Nicholas. And man, oh man, I mean, here's the thing. Lloyd Bridges is I should say, he's sadly passed away, but a very prolific actor. And this kind of relates to what I was thinking about with Ed Begley Jr. when we talked about Once Upon a Time. But when you have these actors with, very storied careers and they've been in these big roles, you expect that if they're going for a role like this in, not to downplay it, but a public television kid show.
Yes.
There's so much potential for them to just phone it in and just, whatever, it's just a kid show, who cares?
Yeah.
But Lloyd Bridges does such a phenomenal job in this episode, and there's so many moments where just his interactions with the other characters, it sends shivers down my spine.
He did a magical job. He totally sold the role. I think he fit right in, and it was a really good choice.
A perfect choice, absolutely.
For this episode, he was just the guy. Especially, I think my favorite moments are when he says, "You're Stacey Jones."
Well, it's good to see you again, Stacey.
Oh, have we met before?
Oh, many times. You probably don't remember. No, I knew you when you were just a little girl.
Oh.
Your grandmother ran this station.
Yes.
you used to have a doll named Betsy.
Yes, Betsy.
Yeah.
I forgot all about her.
You carried Betsy everywhere you went.
Yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't remember you.
No, let that bother you. No, that was a long time ago.
Yes, well, what brings you to Shining Time Station?
I'm here to catch the Northern Star.
I remember as a kid being so moved by her reaction, and similarly with J.B. King and his Ships and Bottles, and that like enchanting music comes on. And I just, as a kid, I was like, oh. And you know, it's funny. I don't think I made, you know, it's funny watching it now. I'm like, Mr. Nicholas, okay, like obviously he's Santa. But as a kid, I didn't necessarily make that connection until later, I think, in the episode. Because I just was like, oh, this is like a cool guy. He seems kind of mysterious and magical. But yeah, I think they were all really well chosen. I have to commend Rachel Minor on her performance as Vicky, because I think she was incredibly strong for her age. I mean, and just in general, I think her performance was very nuanced.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think that, you know, she did a fantastic job in the sense that for a guest character, I'd argue that she plays almost a more important role than our regulars, Matt and Tanya. Like, she drives the plot forward much more than they do.
And I think she steals the show. Because for me as a kid, it was all about her journey. You know, she comes in, you know, really cranky. Remember, am I supposed to be a memory machine? And, you know, she's upset that her mom's plunking her at the train station. And it's funny because I think under her anger and her kind of frustration is probably some sadness and loneliness. Like, I get that sense from her. But then she has such a beautiful journey with getting to know Mr. Nicholas and the way he sort of is just there to offer like little teachings and little moments. I really like that. And it's a great driving force for the episode.
Yeah, it's really funny how it shifts from, like, it starts out as sort of your typical Shining Time Station plot of our regular characters. Very quickly, it becomes a plot about Vicky and Mr. Nicholas, though.
Yeah, it does. And in a very subtle way. Like, I think that's what makes the writing so good, is just the flow of it. It's not sort of like, okay, we're going to insert this story and have this moral, and, you know, she's sad in this. It kind of ebbs and flows. She's with Matt and Tanya, and then something bad happens and she runs away and she's sitting, and then she chats with Mr. Nicholas, who just is waiting for his train. It's actually I think it's a great way to kind of conceptualize his character, because he's this presence throughout the episode. I mean, he comes in, I don't know, a third of the way through or something like that. And then he's just sort of sitting there waiting. Yeah, roughly. And then he's waiting for his train. And so he can just be there to interact with the characters. And so as Vicky is having her moments and going through her emotions, he's just there and he'll offer little pieces. So it doesn't feels very natural.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many wonderful moments between them. And I think my favorite moment is when, Stacy comes over with a blanket and says the trains have been canceled, and she says that Mr. Nicholas is welcome to stay at the station, and he goes, well, it's very kind of you, but the Northern Star will be here any minute now. And all of a sudden you just hear that whistle, and oh my god, it just gets me every time.
It's so good. And I love his reaction. She's like, where's that whistle coming? And I think Dee Dee does such a great job in that moment, because she just looks so surprised and bewildered, because I think we mentioned that there's a huge snowstorm outside, so all the trains are canceled, and you know, so it makes it even more unbelievable. And then he looks up and he claps his notebook shut and said, "That's the Northern Star." And I
love that.
I know. And you know, she says, "But Mr. Nicholas,
that's impossible."
And again, very well acted. And
Stacy Jones.
Miss Jones. I'm surprised.
Nothing is impossible. Unless you stop believing in it, huh?
Yes.
And it's funny, Matt was joking earlier that my handle is Northern Star, and I remember for the longest time on Twitter I just had like random numbers assigned to my name, and then at some point I was like, oh, I gotta pick something, and I have no idea. And I think I was thinking of Shining Time Station, and I was thinking of, okay, what is like a very meaningful component for me? And I think Northern Star stood out, because again, it was this thing that you never see and people don't believe in, but then all of a sudden is there in some kind of magical way. And for me, that in a lot of ways sums up the spirit of the show. You know, we have Mr. Conductor, who J.B. King never sees, but he knows he's there. it's almost like a, and I don't I don't mean to get like to go into the far reaches of my mind, but it almost feels spiritual. Like there's something very there's something about the belief that reminds me of spirituality a little bit. And I would probably say, like, you know, that kind of thing as a kid and believing in magic was probably the beginnings of my, like, finding a bit of my spiritual faith. So it's interesting, you know, coming back to it as an adult and seeing that, and then it kind of loops back around to my name, because I love that message. You know, nothing's impossible unless you stop believing in it. And I have the tattoo "believe" on my shoulder, so there's a lot of interconnectedness there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful episode. It affects you in a lot of different ways, and you know, I think one of the best things, I think, is that, you know, you've got JB King, who's constantly looking for Mr. Conductor, and then at the end of the episode, I really love how they just have, you see Mr. Nicholas point at the tree, and the lights come on, and then he looks back and waves at Mr. Conductor. So it's like, oh yeah, you know, he's different.
Totally. Yeah, it's a very magical moment. It's very special, and it flows so well. I also like that we have the lovely winter train footage in kind of the opening and closing, because that's different for Shining Time to have that. It's been consistently the footage of is it, I'm trying to remember, in the season 1, was it the footage of UP844, or was it?
Yes, it was.
Okay, yeah. So we you know, that was originally there, and then now we get this lovely footage, which, as it turns out, is filmed at the Grand Canyon Railway in Williams, Arizona. Features a locomotive 18, which was also the steam whistle of Northern Star.
Yes, of course. They really got their mileage out of that locomotive, didn't they?
They did. They definitely did.
And that, luckily, if anyone is looking to look into number 18 more, thankfully it has been preserved. It has been moved to Boyertown, and it is operated by the Colebrookdale Railroad Preservation Trust. So if you want to see a screen star of Shining Time Station, that's where you have to go.
Most excellent. I mean, there's so many things to say about this episode, and I have kind of a few other points written down before we dive into the more, you know, the songs and the Thomas stories. One thing was a memory that I wanted to share, which was, I always loved the Simple Gift song that is, you know, I think it's the title of the episode, "'Tis a Gift." It takes it from that line in the song, but it also is the kind of culmination, and it just such a lovely kind of wraparound right at the end. It fits in so well. It sums up the episode. It's very moving how we have Vicky, as her character progresses, you know, understanding more what the meaning of Christmas is, and realizing that her singing a song for her mom is probably like the best gift she could give. And doing that not only for her mom, but to break up the adults arguing about who gets to play Santa's helper. And then everyone just stops and is like, what are we doing? And they turn and listen to this sweet girl singing this song. And then you have, you know, Tex and Rex joining in as, you know, Rory Dodd and the harmonizing, and it's so lovely. And then, you know, the jukebox band are there, and everyone kind of joins in at the end. And interestingly, as a kid, I remember really loving that song, and my mom, I think, heard the music of it from the TV as I was watching it in my room, and she was like, what is that? I love that song. And so I wrote the lyrics out for her on this sticky note, and I put it on her bedside table because she liked the lyrics so much. And so I just have that memory in my mind. And
oh, man.
I shared that, interestingly. I wrote Britt Allcroft back in 2012 when I first came to Toronto, and was sort of realizing, oh, this is kind of Shining Time Station town. And I told her about that memory because it was one that kind of stuck with me. So there's multiple ways this episode has touched me, but, you know, it also links to my family. And
oh my gosh, that you've got me teary-eyed now.
I'm gonna make everyone cry tonight. It's a Shaker song, which I didn't know until a few years ago.
Really?
It is.
Huh.
Yeah. Was written by I can't remember who the fellow was, but I just was looking it up because I think I'd remembered my mom mentioning that. I also enjoy when Mr. C is talking to Matt and Tanya, and you know when he sometimes gets really cryptic and rhymey and stuff, and he was talking. He's saying like sometimes a special person doesn't know they're special, and he's sort of hinting at Vicky's storyline. But the kids are like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you'll know, you know? So I like that characterization of Mr. C because that's very much him. And that he's like, there is a lesson in here and there's something. But as watching as a kid, I'm like, I don't know what he means. Weirdo.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because now that I think about it, I mean, during season 1, Ringo's Mr. Conductor wasn't always super cryptic. Like he was pretty straight and to the point. It was more when they started getting into George's Mr. Conductor that they would have him speak in those kind of strange little rhymes.
That's a good point.
You know, things that they tried to conceal. So it's funny that it's kind of, this was kind of laying the groundwork. And obviously, I mean, maybe we can put that down to Brian McConaughey for writing Mr. Conductor that way. Because he does have involvement in, you know, season 2 and 3 from this point on. So I don't know, maybe that was a conscious decision.
It might have been. I mean, it's interesting. He did have the rhyming in season 1, but you're right. It wasn't, he didn't sort of give cryptic messages, which George Carlin's Mr. C definitely did. And I remember there's one scene where Kara is like, Mr. Conductor, sometimes I don't understand a word you say. And it's great because I think that's probably the experience of a lot of kids until you get to the end of the episode and you're like, oh, right. Okay. That's what he was hinting at.
Exactly. Yeah.
But just wonderful. And I also I do enjoy that they bring back like the schemer Stacy dynamic. I think that scene with him eating his food is one of my favorites, and he's trying to fatten up to be Santa's helper. And you Santa's helper, ho ho ho. That ho 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 will turn into oh 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 when you see my Santa's helper's costume. My mommy made it. And then when they get into their I'm gonna get the committee to vote for me. Yeah, I'm gonna get the committee to vote for me. Yeah. Who needs you? And then he falls on his face and gets cake all on it. It's just a very well paced and timed scene, and you just have Brian and Dee Dee sinking right back into their playful banter. And
that's that's one of my favorite parts too, is when Stacey goes, you know what, Schemer, you've had a lot of crazy ideas before, but this one takes the cake. And Brian just goes, cake, and pulls out a full cake. Just starts eating it.
Thank you for reminding me, Miss Stacey Jones. Yeah, it's great. And it's so funny too, because he's obviously eating like a bucket of KFC chicken.
Yes.
Sorry, this podcast does not endorse KFC. But but you can clearly tell that it is. It's just been like the props department has just put like paper around it.
Yeah, of course.
So he's eating that and all this stuff and the cake, which does look good. I remember as a kid being like, oh, it looks like a Black Forest maybe.
Yeah. I agree.
And also his smear campaign of Stacy with the posters, because I remember seeing a photo of, I think, Written Brick conceptualizing story ideas at the office here in Toronto, and that poster was hanging in the back. So they had it for a little while. Like, oh, I wish it was still around, because you have Stacy as they're like staring off happily into the distance, and Schemer's like doing this weird pose.
Oh my gosh!
But they're funny, especially when he's like, "Do you want a rat training cheese thief or someone gorgeous, intelligent?"
My favorite of those interactions is when it's Schemer and Mayor Flopdinger. And Schemer's trying to convince him that they all smoke big, cheap, smelly cigars, and he says that they smoke them for breakfast. The mayor goes, "For breakfast?" And he just goes, "Yeah, big stinko ones." Like,
I find that hard to believe. He's great. And I also love when he's with Midge, and he's convincing her that she's an alien. That Stacy is an alien, and Midge Smoot says, "Schemer, have you lost what little sense you already had?" The way she says it, that's so great.
And then he goes, "I don't think so, no."
I know. And then she's like, the only thing what is it? The only thing you could ask for is for Santa to bring you a brand new brain. Doom, doom, doom. And she
points at him.
Oh, it's just great. We've got really good banter, but it's fun because it's never like mean. It's just silly and funny, and it is sort of, I mean, they're poking fun at each other, but it's so nice to see all the characters back together again and bantering with each other, and everyone seems really comfortable. That's the impression I get on set. Like, all the characters just feel very at ease and they fall back into their characters easily.
Everyone's interactions are so good, and I mean, the one that always kind of sticks out to me, and it's right from the beginning, is with Tucker and Mr. King when they're interacting with each other. Especially because, you know, Arden Bess is just joining the cast for this one special.
He's a one-off,
But he's a one-off, but you wouldn't guess it because their interaction is so fun and natural. And I always love when Mr. King is asking him about, you know, have you met Mr. Conductor? And he's describing him, and you just see Tucker go, no, I have not seen anyone like that. And you see him just like turning away and going like crazy.
I know. And then the look of surprise on his face when he sees that the gift is gone.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, one interesting note about Tucker Cooper is that he should be Tucker Cupper, technically.
That's true. That's very true.
And I wonder, is he actually Tucker Cooper, or did the actor say the name wrong and they just left it?
Could very well have, yeah.
Because, I mean, also Tucker Cupper, I mean, it's very rhymey, but maybe they thought it sounded too silly or something and they changed it. But that bit sort of stood out to me. I was like, oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if that's maybe like a play on, you know, the whole, just like the last names like being similar, but not exactly similar. I don't know, but...
Well, and I wonder, too, if they did approach... Because everyone's back. I wonder if they approached Leonard Jackson, but he couldn't do it for some reason. Maybe because it was in Toronto, and he couldn't get away to shoot for the week or two that they filmed. I think that it filmed in October or November. I can't recall. Something like that. I think October.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that it's likely because of the shift from the States to Toronto. That's probably why they couldn't get him.
Yeah, and they flew, you know, the guest stars in and whatnot, and they would often do that, Rick was saying, shoot their stuff and then leave. Yeah, and what are your thoughts on just to turn towards some of the segments, what are your thoughts on the jukebox songs?
Oh my god, where do I even start? Like, this is just such a good batch of songs for the Jukebox Band. Like, oh, I mean, right off the bat, we get Over the River and Through the Wood. This rendition is beautiful.
Oh, it's so nice.
Again, we're relying on that classic combo of the voices of, Venice Thomas and Rory Dodd.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh my gosh, the arrangement of it is so good. I really love the moment right after the first verse where you just hear, Tex go, "Join along here, Rex," and then they start harmonizing for the next part. Oh, it gets me every time. I love that one so much.
It's beautiful. And it's I think a relatively unusual one. I mean, I didn't know it outside of the show for a long time. You don't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear it a ton. And so I always associate it with this show. And then when I hear it other places, be like, oh, it's such a cozy, warm, familiar song.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It strikes me because, like, I remember... You know, when you're in elementary school and they kind of get everybody together in the auditorium for Christmas celebrations and they have you sing carols for a concert or whatever. I do remember this song being sung at those occasions, but it was always more of like an upbeat, almost like a marching kind of song.
Interesting. Not as much of this is kind of a ballad.
Exactly, yeah. So to hear it done as a ballad, I was like, whoa, this is really different and like so much better. It works so well.
And how much do you love the jingle bells at the beginning? Like the... as it starts to play the first couple chords. It's just... I really think, actually in terms of all the Jukebox Band, Puppet Band songs, which they did 3.5 of, if you count Simple Gifts, which is a lot. I think they're on point. Beautifully arranged songs and lovely filming of the set when you get the zooming in on the Christmas lights and and how the characters are dressed up for Christmas. It's beautiful. Actually, some of my probably favorite numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the first number is definitely my favorite of the bunch from this special, but you really can't go wrong with any of them, because then you get into the next one, which is their very upbeat, very rockin' version of Jingle Bells.
Oh yeah, which is it's pretty kick-ass, I'll say.
It is, yeah.
And we got Venice Thomas giving her, and she's wicked.
Yes.
Okay, sing it for Schemer, baby, yo!
Dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight. Hey, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, jingle bells, jingle bells.
It's interesting. My favorite is actually Christmas Time at the railway station, because for me that's because that's another one that I didn't know as a kid. I'd never really heard. I heard really classic Christmas carols, and there's something about that song that hits home, and especially the little segment where the mother and son come in from the cold with snow on their scarves, and she wraps his scarf around his neck a little bit tighter, and then she does the same for him. So, that one. I mean, I love Over the River and Through the Woods as well. It's probably almost tied with Christmas Time, but over the years, Christmas Time at the railway station, it's just deliciously nostalgic and sweet.
Clickety-clack, whistle blowing, bells are ringing. People coming and going, riding the trains to their destination. It's Christmas time at the railway station.
Now, is this one... Did they compose that one for the show? Because I've never heard it outside of Tis a Gift.
I don't know. I'm going to do a quick Google here.
I mean, if anything was going to be written specifically for the show, then it definitely would be this one. That would make the most sense, but... Yeah,
I think it actually might be. Oh yeah, Steve Horlick, who was the music guy for the whole series. Steve, great job. I love
Shout
that
out
song.
to our boy Steve.
It's really sweet, and again, the little jingle bells, the soft in the background.
I agree.
So buckle up tight, it's time to go. We're riding the train through the dancing snow, from town to town, all across the nation. It's Christmas time at the railway station.
And then we get them coming in at the end and harmonizing or doing a duet with Vicky. And I think it is quite nice to have her soprano, young soprano voice with Rory Dodd's male voice.
I agree.
It was a good choice on their part. And another standout for the jukebox band is when I can't remember what number it's in, but they all go in a line and go past the screen. I think it's Jingle Bells, because I think I remember Craig saying that the editing for that was quite more complex than usual, and he made a joke to Rick about Rick said something like, when you first, gave us the footage, we hated you, but after we loved you, because they saw how well it turned out. But it was one of the more complicated shoots, I think.
Yeah, and I really love the touch there when you see all the characters going by while Jingle Bells is playing, and then I think it's, Rex or Tex, they give a whistle and everyone jumps back to their instruments to finish the song.
Yes. Oh, and yeah. Any more comments on the Jukebox Band?
Yeah, I mean, really, this is a special where, they're so present and their songs mean so much. I wouldn't change anything about it. And I really love the touch at the end of including them with the rest of the cast while they're singing Simple Gifts, because, it very well could have been something where they just had the cast singing it or just had Vicky singing it.
Yeah.
But the choice to include the Jukebox Band just enhances it so much more.
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah,
and then they loop other voices in at the end, and I don't know if those are the cast or if they're just, kind of a selection of people that they came in to kind of beef up the singing at the end. But everyone, on screen at least mimes it and joins in.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's quite nice.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because in the family special that we reviewed last time, there were no picture machine segments, and this time we have one, and it's sort of sweet. Mr. Nicholas refers to it as a Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's in
I
that
always love
Nickelodeon
that touch. I don't know why.
It's very charming, and he gives her a nickel, and she watches it. And, so it's called The Hobo Song, and it's music and lyrics by Kevin Roth, and it makes me weep. I find it to be such a beautiful segment. For those who aren't familiar with it, it consists of this child coming down the middle of the night and playing with his train set around his Christmas tree, and it sort of brings this story to life about this hobo who's on the train and cold, and then he sees this child standing behind him, and it's basically him as a kid, hands him a teddy bear, and I think in a way reminds him of his inner child. That's always how I sort of saw it. And then the song goes on, and then it loops back around to the child who slowly opens his eyes and then looks down at this little watch that has him and his bear, which was also exchanged between the hobo and the child. So as a kid, that song wrecked me. I remember listening to it and crying hard. So there definitely the emotion of it really touched someplace and still does.
Cold and bitter from winter's weather, just a cold and lonely hobo spending Christmas time alone. And only if he knew that there's an angel by his side, and only if he knew he would never be alone. Well, he turned around to see who was standing there beside him. Just a boy who looked a lot like him many years ago. With a present in his hand, he smiled at that hobo like an angel full of wonder who somehow seemed to know. And now you knew that there's an angel by his side. And now you knew that he would never be alone. Angel by your side.
Yeah, and you know what? If I'm honest, I was always a little bit wishy-washy with this one because I don't know. There was something about maybe the lyrics at certain parts maybe got me, and just it never.
It felt too corny to you. You mean?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it was a little bit too like on the nose, and for the longest time I was kind of like, do I like it? Do I not? But the interesting thing about this that I read is, according to Rick Siggelko, they almost cut this from the special because they were worried that it would be too sad for the younger children who were watching. And as we know, ultimately they kept it. And when I read that, I think that kind of made me appreciate it more, because I really can't picture this special without the hobo song.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, apparently there's another interview, I can't recall where it was, but Rick said that, they got, I think he said there was a pastor at a church who talked about, using it and showing it in sermons at Christmas. And, that speaks volumes, that not only is it, obviously, as you said, as a child, it wrecked you, but even for the adults, like for it to be used in a sermon in a church, clearly it has a very wide-reaching impact, and it's a very emotional bit.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, like when you said that, I was trying to think, I'm like, what was it that struck an emotional chord with me? And I think it was the empathy. Mm-hmm. And because I was such a sensitive child. And so I think the idea of someone who was alone in that way, and I mean, again, the term hobo is sort of out of date now, but, somebody who's essentially like a traveler who's homeless, and I guess not, like in the video, he's alone, he's not surrounded by people he loved. So there was something about like that broke my heart a little bit, and then like kind of broke my heart open. And then there's a way that he got comfort from this angel, or this vision of his younger self, or whatever you'd like to see, and that really brought him comfort, and then kind of loops back around to the child, and then you're like, oh wow, was that just in the child's mind, or how does that work? But there was something about it, I think, that got me in that respect of the empathy, and then also I think, I think there's I don't know if it's meant to be in there or if it's just something that I feel, but I think there's an inner child piece there about reconnecting with your younger self, parts of you that are lost or really struggled when you were younger, or older, I guess in this case. And there was a way that, like, a theme of like coming back to yourself that I think watching it now I'm quite moved by in a different way, versus just feeling really sad for this gentleman in the story. So
yeah, I can agree with that for sure. And I think in addition to all that, of course, I think the cherry on top is the fact that it's Kevin Roth who's singing it, who, of course, we know him as the beautiful vocalist for the theme song. He sung many songs in season 1 of the show too. And this is definitely, I mean, the vocals on the theme song will always get me, but outside of that, I think this is his most affecting song in the series, without a doubt.
Yes. And it's funny because for those of you who were able to see my first podcast of my little train of thought, one where I reunited the Shining Time people, there's a moment in the beginning where I bring Kevin on, a clip of him singing the theme song and just saying hello to everyone. And when we were interacting, I mentioned this song to him and he didn't remember it. And part of me was like, what? How could you not remember this song that for me is one of his standout? He had quite a few good ones, but along with the theme song, this is probably a top one for me. And I
for sure.
I sort of like recalled it, but I imagine he wrote a lot of songs in his career and probably couldn't remember.
Yeah, you write a lot of music and some of them just slip out of your mind after they're recorded. So I guess I can understand that.
Yeah, and I don't know what directions he had. It's also interesting to know that this was a second unit shoot for this music video, as all the sort of music video segments were. And I recall them saying that the train for the shoot, it wasn't steamed up. It was a stationary train. So they got fog machines and wind machines and did the right camera positioning and shaking to make it look like the train was moving for that shot of panning up towards the steam engine. And then,
well, they nailed it, because I definitely thought it was in steam and moving.
I know, right? And so, Frank Vitale, good job. You just nailed it.
Well done, Frank.
And similarly with the hobo in the train car with all the presents, that was all effects. So they did a great job. And then I think that was in someone's house, that scene of the child downstairs, and Looks like they purchased like an LGB train set to do that.
Yes.
But very beautifully filmed. There's a way that it was filmed that, I don't know, the way the snow was all around, the little layout and the watch. There's something about the care that they shot Shining Time with that I really notice. There's just a lot of care and attention to detail and people putting a lot of thought. It doesn't feel rushed. I mean, there were some episodes in like season 3 that do start to feel a little rushed to me, but in when the show is at its best, it feels like they really they're good at what they're doing, and everyone's just confident and just doing it, getting it done.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's a lot of care that goes into this show, and no one can deny that.
Yeah. And then we've got the Thomas stories. So what are your thoughts on those? We have Thomas, Terrence in the Snow, and Thomas's Christmas Party.
Well, as an interesting aside here, technically, this is, I guess if you want to get down to the finer points of it all, this is, I guess, the first Shining Time episode where we have 3 Thomas stories. Because in the TV broadcast, as you mentioned, we do get Thomas, Terrence, and Snow as the first story, or Terrence the Tractor for our North American audiences, followed by Thomas's Christmas Party, which, Terrence the Tractor had been told earlier in season 1, but this was the debut of Thomas's Christmas Party. However, for the home media releases, we actually get something different. So Thomas's Christmas Party becomes the first story shown, and the second story is from season 2, which is Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree. Now, the interesting thing about that one is Ringo did not actually do a proper US dub for it. They simply removed any of the lines that made mention of the Fat Controller and just called it a day. Likely because I think Ringo was maybe gone by that point or unavailable. And I guess that was done to maybe boost the VHS sales a little more, because I think it's more of a draw if you've got 2 episodes that the wider public hasn't really seen as much compared to just 1. So
that's a good point. It's an interesting choice, though.
I mean, it is interesting, and it makes sense to have the 2 Christmas episodes on your Christmas special, of course, but, the issue is that obviously they didn't change any of the script for Shining Time Station, so Ringo, conductor, is still telling the kids about the events of Terrence the Tractor, but then the VHS cuts to Thomas's Christmas Party, so a little bit awkward there, I will admit, and, obviously the editing of Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree is a little bit off, but
it's a little strange.
Overall,
I don't know if it was necessary for the home video release. I mean, I never had that one, so I didn't know. I only ever saw the aired special with the original stories. Did you ever notice it as a kid when you watched the VHS?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay.
And as far as I know, for the longest time, I just knew that it was the 2 main Christmas episodes that were on this special, but then discovering that, it was actually supposed to be Terrence the Tractor as the first story originally, I was like, oh, that kind of makes more sense, actually, with what Mr. Conductor's saying. But, in any case, I mean, really all 3 serve a good purpose for this story, because, you've got Mr. Conductor telling Matt and Tanya about how they can't forget their scarves and mittens when they go outside, and, obviously the story of Thomas not wanting to wear his snowplow is central to that.
But they could have easily used Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree actually as the first story, I think, and I would have appreciated it, because at this point, I've heard that story so many times, and they're like, oh, I don't remember that one. I'm like, I do. Again, we're in this familiar place again, and I actually never saw Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree until I was an adult. I somehow totally missed out on that story, because it wasn't on... I think it was on Thomas's Christmas Party VHS, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
But I never had that one as a kid, and I never watched it, so I never saw it until I was older, and I was like, oh, interesting, I get to see a Season 2 episode I've never seen. So I kind of wish they'd written it in, because at a Christmas tree, it could have fit into their Christmas tree easily, right?
I agree.
I think. So, Terrence, I mean, he's had his time in the snow, I think. I love that episode, I do. And it's funny, because, again, for me, there's this thing of... I was talking about this with a friend the other day. They said, when I watch Shining Time Station on its own, I find myself skipping the Thomas stories. Was this with you, Mike, or was it somebody else?
I think it was with somebody else.
Must have been. But they said, obviously, like, watching season 1 and 2 of Thomas the Tank Engine on their own, of course I wouldn't skip it. I really enjoy it. But sometimes within the context of an episode, I'm like, okay, well, I know the story really well. I want to watch the station stuff more.
Yeah.
This would be a case where I'd fast forward the story. But I would watch Thomas's Christmas Party, because that's a bit more of a rarer episode.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting because the Christmas episodes from, series 1 and 2 of Thomas they always struck me as sort of, these rare things. Like, first of all, you had the point of being that these were specially written episodes, I guess you could say, because they had to sort of adapt pre-written material. So, Wilbert Audrey had done Thomas's Christmas Party, which incorporates the bits from Mrs. Kindly's Christmas, of course. And then Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree was a Christopher Audrey story. But they weren't part of the main Railway series books. So unless you sought out those standalone books, you wouldn't have actually known about them. So, there's that aspect. And for me, I didn't really, I think I had the Thomas's Christmas Party VHS, but I never watched it that much. I think I watched 'Tis a Gift on VHS more than I watched that one. So for me, these two episodes are always kind of associated with Shining Time Station as well. So, I mean, I really love them. I think that, it goes from a more wholesome story, which is Thomas's Christmas Party, to an episode that has a little bit more danger to it in Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree, where you're not sure where Thomas is and will he make it back in time. And at the end of both episodes had this wonderful celebration, wonderful coming together of all the ensembles so far. And they're just, they're simple stories, but they really do a good job of just capturing the holiday spirit as well. Yeah,
they do. And I like the familiarity of Ringo or Mr. C kind of, recounting tales to Matt and Tanya. It feels familiar. But actually, this was the first time I saw those characters, as I hadn't seen season 1. When I was watching season 2, so they were just these random kids. I had no context, whereas they had this whole relationship and experience with all the cast members beforehand. It's just such a good episode. I'm trying to think. So we mentioned that it was the first time filming in Toronto, and I remember when I was kind of interviewing Rick Sigelko a little bit, he said this was really a test run for them to see how it would work in Toronto. It was a trial run for the cast and crew, and they shipped the whole setup here. I think they wanted to see what it was like and how it went, and it seems like it went well, because I think the episode was very well done. Doesn't seem like there were any major hiccups. And shooting in Toronto and Canada had a lot of tax breaks, and it also meant that they hired a fair number of Canadian actors.
That's true.
As well,
That's
which started appearing in season 2, which I think is actually great. Bringing more industry to the city in a time when Toronto didn't really have big studios. Now we have Star Trek filming here in a huge custom made studio space. So things have really kind of changed since then. I believe this was shot on Pharmacy Ave at Studio Oasis, I think, for the first time, which is where it stayed. But it's just interesting to think that they took the whole set apart, brought it all up here, and that was that. Quite a journey.
Yeah, I never would have guessed, because it seems like, I mean, aside from those little details that you pointed out earlier, it's still the same station to me, so they did a pretty seamless job of transporting it.
They did a good job. It wasn't kind of a Tatmar situation where everything got destroyed. The mural wasn't like ripped to shreds.
Yeah, exactly.
I also love how, just speaking to the sort of cast and crew working on the show, that they had the lovely ending credits dedication, which I didn't see in my version as a kid because I didn't see the original one, but they have a dedication to all of those that helped build Shining Time Station. And I just think that's a really beautiful sentiment. And I wonder, I don't know, I wonder if they weren't sure if they would have funding for the second 2 seasons, And so that was like just in case they wouldn't come back. But, and I know, you know, Ringo obviously didn't come back, and they had to replace him with George, and they also had to replace Leonard with Tom Jackson. And obviously they hadn't found Tom at this point. Otherwise, he'd probably be in the episode.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. If we had got the introduction of Billy Two Feathers here, I think that would have been a cool little introduction. It would have been.
And it's interesting. I kind of lumped this one in with Scaredares because they both are transitional episodes for me, in that it's really Matt and Tanya handing over the torch to Cara, Becky, and Dan as the kids. But we also get a lot of the familiar banter between the characters that we know and love, you know, with Schemer, Stacy, Midge, and that continues on to Scaredares, which is actually another very top episode for me. It feels very similar in that it's Halloween themed, so it's another exciting kind of holiday themed episode, and they pack a lot of fun stuff in and do really great musical numbers. So I see those as very linked. And then for me, season 2 really starts with Oh What a Tangled Web.
Yeah, I agree. They both kind of go together sort of hand in hand. And yeah, like you said, it's very much a passing the torch to the new kids and the start of the new season.
Hi, I'm Ken Bianco Jr. from Train World, where we have the greatest selection of model trains and train sets. We also are proud to carry Bachman's full line of Thomas & Friends products. With a large variety of different brands and scales, we have the best items for your model train collection. You can find Train World on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can see our latest products and even be invited to all our events like Thomas Tuesdays. Visit trainworld.com today to find your next addition to your model railroad journey.
Hi, I'm Mike O'Donnell, one of the composers of the original Thomas the Tank Engine theme, and I'm here to tell you that I have released a selection of re-recorded themes and songs from the classic shows in a series of albums called the Engine Themes. These albums include a variety of classic themes and songs from the original TV series, as well as a few new compositions. You can purchase these albums on CD or digital download, as well as posters and pin badges. Have a look online at modmusic.co.uk. And for a special offer for Right On Track listeners, you can use the special code ROT20 for a 20% discount on all digital downloads. Be sure to enter the code when making your purchase. Thank you for your support and happy listening. Take care and stay safe.
Any other trivia bits on your end, Mike?
Well, in terms of trivia that I can think of, I guess one thing we could highlight here is that this is technically the last episode from the original run of Shining Time Station to debut a Thomas story from season 1 of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends.
Yes.
The only episode from season 1 that didn't get a Ringo Starr US dub is Whistles and Sneezes. Every other episode was done for season 1, so you can find all those online. Whistles and Sneezes, unfortunately, was skipped, and that's one of my favorites, so it hurts my heart just a tiny little bit.
Oh, I love it too.
I know, it's so good. But unfortunately, Whistles and Sneezes would not appear in Shining Time Station until the season 2 episode, At You, which is very fitting for this type of story. Thank you. So kind of you.
There's a little Robin Hood Men in Tights reference for you there.
That's it. We do love that for sure. The other little bit of trivia I guess we can say is this is the first time and potentially the only time that the Rainbow Sun is mentioned outside of the Shining Time Station theme song.
Absolutely. The other time being another fantastic episode called Jingle Jingle Jingle.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot about that.
But you're right. They don't often mention it as its own entity. So I guess it's interesting they chose to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if that was just sort of a, maybe they included it because it was a quote unquote special episode. But Yeah, it's interesting that you didn't hear about it until now, because you hear about so many sort of named services in season 1 of Shining Time, but this is the first time that the Rainbow Sun comes up.
Yeah, it is kind of strange, and I wonder if it was just them returning to the familiarity of Shining Time Station lore.
Yeah, maybe with all the changes that were happening in this special, with all the new people and sort of new things that were going on, maybe it just made sense to throw in what they could to bring back that sense of familiarity, I guess.
Absolutely. Any other final thoughts?
Oh, so many, and yet what else can I really say about this episode that hasn't been said before? I mean, this is just this is an essential Shining Time Station episode. It's something that you just can't skip. And it's funny, we were talking about this earlier, but you know, obviously you watch it at Christmas, but I find myself watching it outside of Christmas too.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, when the new uploads by Joseph were being done earlier this year, I think with the way that it worked out, it was like the end of April or start of May that this one aired on his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So like, it was getting pretty hot here, but I was like, well, I can't just not watch it. Like, of course I'm going to watch it when it's uploaded here. So, you know, Christmas came a little bit early this year, but that's okay. We love that. So, yeah, it's just, this is definitely, if I had to pick on my hand a certain number of episodes to recommend to someone who's never seen Shining Time Station, this one unquestionably makes the cut.
Absolutely. I would agree with you there. It is top tier Shining Time. And it's interesting. This was, in terms of Joseph's uploads, along with the family specials, it was also on U-matic tape. So it's not quite as sharp as the other VHS dubs that he's uploaded. The colors are a little bit more dull, but it's quite a good upload.
Yeah,
overall.
I agree completely.
We're very grateful to Joseph for that.
And Joseph has uploaded both the broadcast version and the VHS version if you would like to see the difference in Thomas stories included.
Yes, there's a lot of variety there. And just to loop back around to, I think, one of the last kind of points is that, you know, we want to touch on some of the morals at the end, as we've been doing. And I was trying to reflect on this, and I think, you know, in that behind the scenes interview where Rick is talking about this Christmas episode when they're filming it, he mentions a bit about, I think, probably the commercialization of Christmas and gifts and the focus of, you know, and you hear a lot of times the kids saying the best part about Christmas is getting presents, or it's boring or whatnot. And then, so for me, what I sort of formulated as the moral was something like the best gifts come from the heart. You don't need to spend money or make these grand gestures. It's just these very simple things, which also kind of fits in with the simple gift. But I liked the message of it's just like a kind gesture, or as Mr. Nicholas is saying, like a nice word for somebody who's feeling sad. And again, people can say like, oh, that's corny or whatever, but I love corny stuff. And I like
it doesn't feel corny though. That's the thing.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Not to me. I mean, it just feels like the heart of the show. Again, I know I talk about the heart of the show a lot, but this is again just about leading with the heart, and that really touching people. And so you have that lovely connection between Vicky and Mr. Nicholas, where I think he really allows her to bring her heart out a little bit more as she feels safer and more accepted and more wanted in the station. And then I think it's interesting that her mom being kind of absent and feeling kind of dropped off by her mom as her mom's busy rushing around getting shopping, and then they can kind of come back together. And you can tell how much her relationship with her mom means to her, for Vicky, I mean. And obviously for any kid, a parent is, you know, almost next to God when you're that age. But she goes around with so much anxiety, like, I need to find Santa and tell him to get a gift for my mom. And that's, you know, that's one of her last little things she goes through. And Mr. Nicholas is like, I feel like Santa's probably already got a gift from your mom, but what are you going to give her? And, you know, how can you share your love with her? And I think too, it's just nice for kids to know that they can move adults in that way. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to save up a ton of money. They can just, have a thought like, I know that's meaningful and this will mean something to them, and it'll make me feel good doing that for them in a really sweet reciprocal way.
Yeah, I always really loved the part where, Mr. Nicholas is talking about all the gifts that you can give, and Vicky says, well, those things don't come, wrapped in paper, or they don't cost money. And he just looks at her very genuinely and says, presents don't always have to come, wrapped in bows and ribbons, or they don't always have to cost money. And it just feels like, it doesn't feel like a moral being shoved down your throat. It feels like a very genuine message.
Yeah.
And it is.
It is.
Mr. Nicholas, are some people really all alone on Christmas?
Yes, Vicky, I'm afraid so.
And they don't get any presents?
Well, that all depends on what you mean by presents. Not every present comes wrapped in pretty paper with a ribbon and bow, Sometimes a present can be just a smile. Or a kind word to somebody who's feeling sad. Or a poem, or maybe a picture that you've drawn.
But they don't cost any money.
Presents don't have to cost money.
And similarly, I think when he's talking about, how will Santa know where I am or what I want? And he says, like, there's a light in all children that shines, and he can see that light. And again, I know it, like that, almost like coming back to it, almost feels spiritual, and it's connected, and because it's all about belief. And even if you don't, if you don't celebrate Christmas, believe in Santa, and or you have a different faith, or you're atheist or whatever it might be, I think everyone can still believe in believing in some way. That's a universal thing. And so I think that touches on that, even though it's in the context of Christmas. It's about how we're all interconnected.
Yeah, I agree
as
100%.
human beings. And I know I'm getting very like philosophical here, but
yeah, no, it's you're absolutely right. It's not something that's limited to just the Christmas crowd. It's a very universal message, and I think if they had changed whatever holiday they were celebrating to something else, I think it still would strike a chord.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say one thing that I noticed watching it back is just probably just more a circumstance of time is, a little disturbing that like just a random stranger is talking to a young girl in a train station, like unmonitored. And I know, again, this is like a fantasy situation. It's a lot different, and we trust Mr. Nicholas because we know he's Santa, and that's all part of the story and the make-believe. But it just is something that struck me, especially when he's like touching her face and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that would be written differently now. Which in a way, like I know on the one hand, it's like, oh, that's a bit sad that people like that there's not as much room for like safe connection with male figures. On the other hand, there is also safety to think about. We want kids to be thinking about consent and like, do I know this person and how much do I want to share with them? So sorry, I'm not trying to bring Shining Time too much back down to the real world, but it just was something I noticed that I'm like, okay, that's there a little bit.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I think if this was being done today, the interactions between Mr. Nicholas and Vicky would be a lot different, and I think maybe there would be perhaps another adult involved a little bit more that Vicky knows.
There's a way, and I think there's a way that they could have, like, if it was done today, it would still be beautiful, and they could weave in a lot of the same themes, but they maybe have a parent introducing them, or she says like, oh, I don't know who you are, or whatever. There would be a bit more, just sort of not just going right into that much trust so quickly. And I think it's probably good that kids do have a sense of, being careful and a sense of consent and all that. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it's definitely something good to drive home. And you can tell, I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these shows from past decades is you can definitely watch it back and, there's still good intentions there, but you can tell that certain things would be definitely done different if they were written in today's world, for sure.
Yeah. And I think, we can still really enjoy it, and I do, and there's just things I notice, but I think it's important that, if either of us notice that, it's important to mention them. for our viewers, just to know that, just so that you know, we're cognizant of those differences. It doesn't mean we still can't enjoy it, but it doesn't mean that we can't still really enjoy something and look at it with a critical lens. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. Like, you know, this is, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this, you know, this thing feels a bit off, so this episode is garbage, whatever. It's not like that. It's just like, oh, it's just always good to have a little bit of a critical eye.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, we've even had that with, you know, the Thomas franchise itself. I think back to when I was, you know, first reading the Railway series, and there's the line at the end of the book version of Old Iron where it talks about the two boys who were on James's footplate and set him loose as a runaway. It talks about how they were caught, and I believe the quote is that they were walloped soundly by their fathers.
Yes.
And, you know, you get even to the 1980s when that episode was being made for TV, and yeah, that wouldn't have flown back then, for sure.
I know. I mean, thankfully they had the sense to change it. And even before Shining Time was around, you know, I don't know if Brit was already thinking about how she could bring it to America in season 2, but
I'm sure she was.
She must have been. But they had the sense, even when it was in the UK at that point, to be like, okay, yeah, no, we can't see that. Because by 91, when they're doing the third season, you know, Rick had a lot more of a hand in the episodes and whatnot. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so it's important that things change. But this, I think, is a classic. It's a classic episode, and I hope that if it's not an episode that you're familiar with, that it becomes one that you do kind of go to, and let us know what you think and how you connect with it. Because I mean, Mike and I both grew up watching it, which is a very different experience, you know, seeing it through a child's eyes and then through the years and then making sense of it now as adults. But if you're coming to it new and fresh now, let us know what it's like to watch it for the first time in your 20s or 30s. What are your impressions? What moves you? What do you feel like could be tweaked a little bit?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to hear the perspective of someone who's just watching it for the first time in the modern era, and you know, how does it strike you? Because obviously it's very different for us. We've got nostalgia factored in, but someone who's just coming into it fresh, you know, I'm curious to see what all you think of it. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Are there things you would change? Let us know.
And again, like, I think as a kid, I felt the genuine heart of this episode and this show. And so coming back to it now, it's so reaffirming to just be like, okay, that's real. These are actors, but they're also having a great time doing what they're doing. They're liking their characters. They love who they work with. It feels like a family. And then you get that feeling of family experiencing it and watching it, which is a really nice full circle, I think, for viewers, kids and parents alike. And on the thread of evaluation, what would you rate this particular special, my friend?
Well, I think I'm going to have to give this one a very high rating. I'm giving this one a 9.5. This is basically a near perfect episode to me. I think my only nitpick, and I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't bring this up earlier in the episode, but as a kid, I always kind of felt like maybe I was missing something because of the way that Tucker is introduced, because of the way that Vicky is introduced. You know, they're kind of given, they're talked about in the script in a way that makes you feel like maybe they were in a different episode of Shining Time Station, or, you know, the introduction's like maybe a little bit rushed. So, you know, and I still think that to this day. I think, you know, it feels like we're supposed to know who these characters are, but we never actually got an introduction to them before. So I think there maybe could have been some rewrites there to bring them into the fray a little bit smoother, but that's a very minor nitpick. I think everything else is completely on point. I love the jukebox songs. I love the picture machine / Nickelodeon segment. I love the Thomas stories. And as we've mentioned, all the cast just interacts with each other so well. There's not really, you know, outside those minor nitpicks about the introductions, there's not anything I would change about this. This is just an essential Shining Time episode to me.
It is for sure. And in talking to Mike, my rating it went up a little bit. It was 9.5, but I bumped it to 9.75.
We're getting fractional, baby.
I know. This is for you, Denim, Perry, and Connor, for your when you guys get to the like very, very minuscule points. But it's near perfect for me. I can't really fault anything in this episode. It's all just so well written and so well acted. I think for me, the 0.25 is a little bit about Matt and Tanya. I don't feel the same way I felt about them as kids in season 1. I don't feel the same childlike wonder from them. And I think you're right about that, Mike. It's probably just because they're older, and that makes sense. But I'm glad if we didn't have Vicky, it would feel like a very different episode. Because Vicky does seem younger, and you really see her character development. And Matt and Tanya don't really... they don't have much character in this episode. Like you said, they don't even really have major roles. They're just sort of functions for Vicky. And well, sorry, no, that sounds a bit harsh. But they don't feel very strong to me, to be honest, in this episode.
Yeah, they definitely do feel like a vehicle to get to Vicky's plot, for sure. Like they kind of just drop off after.
Yeah. And there are moments where you do see them a bit more of their color and acting, but I find their acting a little flat or a little kind of subdued. And I mean I love both those actors to pieces, but just in this episode, given the performances of everyone else, it doesn't totally fit. So that's, I mean, if that was different, if they were maybe written a bit differently, it would probably be a 10 for me. But I just noticed that 100%. Watching it back. That's the only part that falls like a tiny bit flat. But it's great fun, and Mr. C is in fine form, and I love when he drapes his little new scarf over the edge of the information booth, which I found out from Richard Grunberg, who was one of the camera lighting guys. They had to make the spikes of the information desk wood out of like giant green foam board to achieve that effect. And so those of you, I mean, you know, all the Mr. C stuff was green screen, and you think about how many things he was interacting with and big props. It's also actually the only time we ever see the Ringo Starr Mr. Conductor stand-in puppet when Vicky is putting it in the tree. Which I noticed as a kid because I was like, okay, she's grabbing him kind of like a doll. But it's the only time we ever see him, and they made his custom love for it. And you can see that very doll on display at the Grammy Museum in, I believe it's Los Angeles, in the Ringo Starr display. So if you want to make a pilgrimage to see him, you can do that. I mean, he is a Groucho Marx doll dressed up in Mr. Conductor clothes, basically. So, which I just found out in seasons 2 and 3 was a Ricky Ricardo doll.
Oh, they changed it up, did they?
They did, and I have some photos of that'll be on display at my upcoming exhibit. So,
go to see Adrian and Edison, everybody.
Yes. Now the thing is, this is probably airing after Edison, so if you missed the show, I'm very sorry.
Hope you went to see Adrian and Edison, everybody.
So I hope you came, and if I'm hoping, I think it's going to be great fun, a great success, and maybe I'll be there next year. It took a lot of coordinating, or it's taking a lot of coordinating to do it, but it's just the most fun I've had in ages, even though it's like insane getting it ready. So come one, come all, or if you have, thank you for coming.
There we go. This is, the glory of Time to Shine is that we cover both the past, the present, and the future.
We are everywhere. We're going kind of on a Christmas Carol journey through the Shining Time Thomas verse.
In fact, by the time you finish this podcast, in the present day, I'll probably be pouring myself some eggnog. So there you go.
Oh, very nice. That sounds. I could go for a glass of eggnog with a little bit of nutmeg sprinkled on top.
Oh, I wish we had some right now. It would have made it so festive.
I know. I'm drinking water, which is delicious, but not quite the same.
It doesn't hit the same. I know.
And I always just have so much fun with you, Mike. So thanks again, and looking forward to our next episode.
Yes, thank you, everybody. If you are listening to this, if this goes up prior to Christmas, then we wish you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
We do, from the bottom of our hearts, from our shining hearts to yours. Oh man, we are just we are corny and we're proud of it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I've been Adrian.
I have been Mike.
And this has been Time to Shine. We'll see you soon, guys. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Well, that was great fun.
Oh, that was fun.